Hey guys, and welcome back to another breakdown. Today we're going to be covering The Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 2. Now, if you haven't checked out the previous breakdown for Episode 1, you can do so after or before this video. I'll link it in the description. Or you can go ahead and watch 1 and 2 put into one video and edited a little bit differently for your timely convenience. So starting off with Episode 2, right where we left at the end of Episode 1, they crash land towards the ground of Serreno. The thrusters finally turn on at the last moment, providing them a somewhat safer landing as they communicate with Hunter and Wrecker, who are escaping Dooku's palace and heading into the city to hide, which kind of could be speculated as the ruins of war. Omega and the boys are in the upper forest region of the planet. After crash landing, Tech breaks his leg, his femur to be exact, and they hoist him out of there and up the cliff. Captain Wilco, a captain of the clone forces, or now I guess turning stormtroopers, during the mission on Serreno with an uncolored patch, mind you, or rather a black one, is a hard-as-nails captain who wants proper confirmation that the thieves are dead or found. And this is very unlike Rampart, who just kind of signed them off as being dead without really confirming. And we'll see that more to the end of this video, which I think was probably the most important thing from the first 2 episodes here, which really kind of dives into the future of the clones, the future of the episode and the Empire, and their overall transition into stormtroopers and how expendable the clones really were. Omega, Echo, and Tech hobble their way through the forest as they come across Romar. This is an elderly man, a survivor of the planet who survived the imperial takeover. He takes them to his shelter, which is really the only shelter in the area, at Echo's orders, and apparently there are many others there with him, but we don't get to see them. Hunter and Wrecker are watching the clones setting up a perimeter as Captain Wilco proves to be quite the intelligent leader, giving orders to his men. He would have been a good asset to the team had he not... Well, yeah, we can basically talk about that at the end of this breakdown, what happens to him. Wrecker and Hunter come across some old separatist tanks, and it was really cool to see these guys again. If you remember these tanks from Episode 1 during the war against the Gungans on Naboo, as well as many episodes of the Clone Wars, including the very first one with Yoda. They plan to power these tanks up and get out of there with sheer firepower alone, a very Wrecker thing to do. Omega speaks with Romar, and he starts to talk about Dooku, which is pretty cool. He lived during the time of Dooku, and he's quite old, so he's about the same age as Dooku would have been anyways, maybe a little bit younger. He tells them that Dooku took from not just the worlds that he conquered, but also his own people, as he points to himself. Once Dooku left the Jedi Order after the death of Qui-Gon Jinn, he ended up turning Serreno into a part of the CIS, the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Romar gives Omega a kaleidoscope as she looks into it, and she's amazed at all the colors, exclaiming that there's jewels in there. Romar tells her, no, just reflected glass. It's meant to make you happy, which is worth far more than any jewel. Now, this is beautiful. In a world that's taken all the money from him and his fellow people, he knows how to be happy without much at all, whereas Dooku had all the money in the galaxy, and yet in his opinion was a scummy, greedy person. Romar brings Tech a Serenian external hard drive, essentially, pretty much, filled with the planet's art, music, memories of his people, and history, and Tech obviously fixes it. Hunter and Wrecker try to power the separatist tanks, but to no avail. They've been dead for far too long. So they grab a battery from one of the tanks using Wrecker's immense strength, and the only way they knew which battery still had juice in it, my theory, is because of Hunter's ability to feel electromagnetic energy. So he could probably feel some of the juice left in one of the batteries. And, well, at least that's my theory. We learned about this ability back in the final season of the Clone Wars when they teamed up with Anakin on Anaxis. Wrecker hooks the battery pack up to the literal tank's cannon that he rips off and blasts their way out of there. So this is going to be a cool little Easter egg that they're going to be carrying with them throughout the rest of the season that Wrecker's going to be blasting people with. Omega sneaks off to the crashed freighter and grabs some jewels from the war chest of Dooku. As the clones start to approach them, cornering them in, Hunter and Wrecker get to the ship and head towards the rest of the crew to pick them up. Tech fights off the clones, cornering Echo and Omega trapped in the freighter, as Omega drops all the jewels. Her hopes are to get the crew rich to buy their freedom from these risky jobs once Sid gets shut down, and mainly because she overheard Echo complaining about Omega ruining their lives. So there's a bit of a, sappy moment. Echo assures her that he didn't mean it like that, in a dire situation once again, and they jump their way out of there as an LAAT gunship approaches to blast them to oblivion, when Tech steps in and saves the day as he uses the Gatling gun to shoot down the ship and any approaching clones. Romar also helps by pulling Omega and Echo up to safety with the rope as the boys arrive just in time in the ship to grab them. Romar throws the kaleidoscope to Omega and says, "Remember what I said." So I think that there's more to this thing than meets the eye. There's more to this toy. It's probably all jewels inside, and it's not just reflected glass. And maybe this is the payday that they needed, or perhaps the toy itself is extremely valuable or belonged to Dooku, who knows. This shows that even though Romar didn't have money, he valued the fun and happiness that the jewels provided through the kaleidoscope rather than selling it. Now this is where it gets interesting. Captain Wilco speaks with Rampart, and he's told that there were inaccuracies in his report. Rampart informs him that the Bad Batch Clone Force 99 was destroyed on Tapoca City on Camino. He did it himself. Captain Wilco says he's mistaken, as he says 2 of them were seen with his own eyes. So Rampart tells him that he must falsify an official report, because if he doesn't and ends up notifying the Empire that the Bad Batch are still alive, it'll look bad on Rampart for not confirming the kill and just writing it as if he succeeded in terminating them. Rampart is afraid of Tarkin. He says if he finds out, then he'll be at risk, so either his job will be at risk or he'll be terminated himself. Wilco says he won't fake the report, he won't falsify the report, so Rampart shoots him off the cliff. Now, I saw some people in the live chat for the watch party, shout out to all of you there, saying that maybe Wilco is still alive, but dude, I don't think so, man. That was a really far and high fall. I think the guy is Wilhelm Scream dead. Now, in my opinion, this is probably the biggest moment of the first 2 episodes, maybe the past season in itself. I think once the clones find out, if they do, that Wilco was killed by Rampart, they could actually rebel against him. Now, Order 66 is one thing, sure, with the inhibitor chip, but treason against their own kind, betrayal against their own kind, against their brothers, is what could set the clones off, and possibly why Cody says to Crosshair in the trailers that clones are starting to disobey Order 66. This is another reason why I think Palpatine wanted to replace clones with stormtroopers, just regular enlistees, because the clones, while they are obedient for the Order 66 and all that stuff, they still see themselves as one collective group, right? They see themselves as brothers compared to anyone else in the Empire, perhaps like regular humans. Right, we have to remember these guys are literally clones of each other, and while they have their own identities, they did fight together in war during the Republic, during the Clone Wars, and they fought alongside one another. They built relationships with one another, and there's only so much that the inhibitor chip and Order 66 can do to control them, sure, against Jedi, who they now think are treasonous and betrayers, but against themselves, against one another, I think that's going a little bit too far, and that's going beyond the reach and the power of the inhibitor chip. I think the love the clones have for their brothers are going to outweigh any sort of command that the Empire could put on them regarding Order 66 and whatnot. I don't think it's far-fetched to think that the clones will eventually find Captain Wilco's body somewhere at the bottom of that cliff and wonder why he got there and why there's a blaster shot in him. That, or there are security recordings everywhere, and perhaps some personnel will see it and a clone will be informed and then tell the rest of the crew. And that way we could have like a little rebellion inside of the actual Empire, where we could start to see the real reason that the stormtroopers came in and the clones were pushed out. Because in Legends, it was merely just Palpatine wanting sheer numbers and not to spend all that much money on clones when he could just have a massive force. Albeit not as talented and trained as clones were, but just a bigger number of troopers, which is what he wanted. He thought, that would intimidate more of the galaxy if you have more stormtroopers around, sort of like security guards. So let me know what you guys think about this episode. For me, the ending was really the climax of it all, where Captain Wilco was betrayed by the Empire, betrayed by Rampart, and it kind of just shows and cements the fact that the Empire is always just sort of fighting amongst themselves, kind of like the Sith did in the Old Republic. It's just a lot of infighting, and this is one of the reasons why they failed, because they just couldn't work synergistically together, kind of like the clones did. They were always just trying to one-up each other and go for promotions. Think of Krennic and Tarkin, for example, or even in Andor, how we saw the ISB Act. Thanks for watching today's breakdown. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like on your way out, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Until then, remember, the Force will be with you always.